does an adopted child need most? To be able to trust the people in their life, right?
Yes.
Because that is a theme that I see so often in my practice is this fear of trusting, right? Our original, the most important relationship that we were to have was broken, at some point at birth or a few months or even a few years. But that breach of trust, right, that between baby and mom.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Living in Adoptionland. I'm your host, Brian Elliott. This is the podcast I wish I had before I started my journey more than 20 years ago. I explore the world of adoption from positive stories to stories about heartbreak, trauma, and sometimes even the lifetime of hidden pain. There are more than 500,000 kids in the foster care system today waiting to find a home, while infertility rates are at their highest in history, not to mention the pain of a child or parent's search for biological family only to discover they don't want to be found. We'll also talk about the DNA science that is coming for your family secrets, the complexities, controversy, and casualties in the multi-billion-dollar unregulated business of babies. All right, let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Living in Adoptionland. I'm your host, Brian Elliott. Today I'm here with Lesli Johnson MFT, and she is an expert in, I would say, maybe I'll let you say, we met through mutual friend Leslie McKinnon all those years back, but tell us what your expertise is.
Expert is such a big word. I work with all members of the adoption and foster care community. So adoptees, birth parents, adoptive parents, prospective adoptive parents, and also now beginning to work with members of the assisted reproduction community. So they're adults now, and they're wanting a lot of their issues are very similar to that of to those issues that adoptees share, especially late discovery adoptees. So people who are maybe discovering that their parents that they thought were their genetic parents aren't. So I've added them to my community as well.
That's amazing. I usually ask my guests, what is it like living in Adoptionland?
Yes, I've heard you ask that, and I was trying to think of what I was going to say. So what is it like? It's different now working with community members, right? It's much different now as an adult and having a better understanding of how separation loss shaped me. So it's much different than it was when I was a child and younger. It's always interesting and it's always different, even though people share maybe similar themes. The stories are always a little bit different. So it's okay. It's okay living in Adoptionland.
Yeah. Can we go back in the chronology? Let's get personal for a second.
Okay.
Back to your personal story. Can you maybe fill in some of the backstory and bring us up? Like, tell us.
Sure. So I was born in the late 60s, and my parents, my biological parents, were 20, and they're, during that time, that was the baby scoop era where women were sent away. There was really no option of them raising me, although my birth mother really tried to figure out a way that she could do that on her own. She didn't sign my papers. She didn't sign away her parental rights until I was 3.5 months old. So I was born and placed in foster care. And then she did eventually sign the adoption papers, and I was adopted by my parents, who later adopted my brother, not genetically related, but I have one younger brother who is also adopted. And we were raised in the Midwest. We were told we were adopted. I don't remember the conversation, so that was probably the one plus of how my parents handled that. But we didn't ever talk about adoption, biological parents, trauma. Definitely not trauma. This
Right.
was I was my parents' gift. And so, looking back, I do realize I thought about it like most kids do often. So I thought our really good family friends, my mom's best friend, had 4 children. And I remember thinking, that's probably it. She's probably my biological mom, and my adoptive mom couldn't have kids, and so they had this secret arrangement where she had a baby and gave gave me to my adoptive parents.
That
That wasn't true.
That was your the fantasy.
Yeah, the fantasy.
Or where your mind went with
Yeah,
it, at least.
yeah. Or there was a lunch lady at my elementary school who had really blonde hair, and I thought, oh yeah, isn't she going to really be surprised when she figures out that I'm her daughter? So I think it's a myth that kids don't think about it, right? Even so, a lot of times adoptive parents will say to me, "Oh yeah, my child doesn't think about it. This isn't adoption related." And then when you get the child into the room, they share some really powerful fantasies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So back to my not so short story. My parents didn't talk about adoption, and so I really, I actually felt like it was a threat to even talk about it, especially with my adoptive mom. I thought it was really something she couldn't handle, and that was proven true when I did let her know that I had reached out to DCFS to get my medical information. So I'm sure you know that that's often sort of a guise for adoptees, like a safe way to find information. And
so for those who don't know what that acronym means.
Oh, yeah, Department of Children and Family Services.
Okay. And how did you go about, let's put a timestamp, about how old were you when you did that?
I was about 19. I was 19.
So you're an adult,
right.
plus one.
Right.
Let's go back to your mom and the signals, because, people who listen to this or watch this show, they're from all the constellations, right? Mm-hmm. We may be talking to parents who've given up kids for adoption, individuals or couples who are in consideration of adopting, or parents who are then searching, or adoptees. There's everyone, right? So you thought maybe that your mom would not react well when you told her. What were the signals that she gave you that inclination?
I guess looking back, they were signals that we just weren't talking about it at all.
Okay.
And
silence was deafening.
Yes. And also just some subtle things she would say. It sounds creepy, but, things like, oh, mom knows best, and I know what's best for you. A lot of these sort of menacing messages that there was a real. My mom she died several years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you. But there were really messages, and we we had a very interesting bond. We were very close, but almost too close. And I wouldn't say codependent, but there was definitely an element of. In terms of attachment theory, if I sensed if she was okay, then I could be okay.
Oh, okay.
So that this information would not be something that would be okay to her. My curiosity, it was just a sense. It was a sense, and it was definitely proven correct when she found out that I was searching. And she
did she warn you what might happen?
No, she didn't warn me. It just was there was just a knowing. I mean, there was just a knowing that it wasn't going to go well, and it didn't go well.
You created a riff or something.
Yeah, she didn't talk to me for about a week, and said that I opened a Pandora's box, and how could I do this?
So kind of passive aggressive.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was all the things that you hear that. Those kind of colloquialisms that parents say, how could you do this, and what am I not enough, and this real betrayal that I'd really just done the ultimate worst thing.
Yeah.
So I really put it all away for many years, and probably about 5 years after that, my birth mother, her name is Candace, she hired a private detective and found me. So I got a call from her, and I waited till the coast was very clear. My mom and my stepdad were on vacation in Europe, and I arranged to meet with her. So I thought they can't possibly find out they're in Europe.
Right.
So
very sleuthy of you.
Yeah, very sleuthy.
Yeah.
Which
is a theme, by the way, for adoptees.
Right.
Sometimes we have to be that way.
Yeah.
To either, if we're trying to accommodate feelings, or maybe it's just guessing whether or not we're going to create problems.
Well, and that's very difficult for me because I'm really bad at hiding things, or I cannot lie to save my life. So that was a very big decision for me to go ahead and meet with her, as a 26-year-old woman. behind my mom's back, right?
Okay.
The younger parts of me were really still so scared that she
Conflicted.
was going to find out.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I didn't maintain a relationship with her, Candace, my birth mother. It wasn't until I was in graduate school and really studying about the effects of early trauma and using the word trauma to even associating the word trauma to separating a child from their mother at birth. And I reached back out to my birth mother, and we have a relationship that's, I mean, she's a very nice person. I see her a few times a year. It's not a close, intimate relationship. I think it could be closer or would be closer if she had done her own work around this. So
Okay.
her fantasy is very much that she made a very good decision and that I had a really beautiful life. I had a good life.
Sure.
But she's in that sort of fog still,
Yeah.
right? Just as my adoptive mom was also spent her time in the fog. And it was me coming out of the fog that disrupted that story.
Yeah, I want to talk about the fog and maybe put a definition on it, your definition. Sure. But also, I was just going to maybe sidebar comment as you were describing your adoptive mom. Have you seen that Disney movie Tangled?
I don't think I have.
I think it's the Rapunzel story where she lets down her hair, and it's a very codependent relationship where her mom is pressuring her to never go out and explore the outside world.
Right.
It's far too dangerous.
Right.
You can't do this without me, obviously.
Yeah.
All those kind of classic, what I understand to be codependent tendencies.
Yeah. And I think the word codependent, I sometimes struggle with that term because there's such a negative connotation. I really think it's attachment wounds, right? It's how we bond with our caregivers. And that bond that I had with my mom was really an insecure attachment in terms of if she wasn't okay, I wasn't okay.
Yeah.
And instead of her being attuned to me and kind of meeting my needs, looking at the world through my eyes and meeting my needs as a small child and as a adolescent and even a teenager, it was more about her needs.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a sign of an immature adult.
Yeah.
Not be able to maybe process.
She had her own wounding. I mean, she came from a very abusive house, neglectful home as a child, and I think she really did. I can say that now. She's not here, and I love her and loved her dearly. I have had a lot of anger around some issues when I did want her to meet my birth mother and my uncle and some of my biological relatives. But now I can actually say that I think she really did do the best she could. Could she have done more? Could she have educated herself and caught herself up, with issues related to this? Yes, she didn't. And I think many adoptees could say that about their parents as well.
Yeah, I was going to co-sign that to say that has been the thread that's run through all of these episodes so far. And kind of a light bulb moment for me, which is regardless of your adoption status, if you're an adoptee or not, trauma is the common thread that runs through everyone's lives.
Right.
And I'm just realizing this more and more that, as an adoptee, being able to sort of categorize my experience as trauma, because it hasn't ever been available for me until I came out of the fog more. I mean, I'm probably still in it. You can be the judge of that, but
no judgment.
I'm just realizing more and more that everyone has trauma. If you have a pulse, you probably have trauma, and then it's all about how we deal with that and cope with that. And
yes.
And again, just to underscore what this podcast is for. This is the podcast I wish I had before I started my journey, because I had no idea that, one, I was, off on this journey with a bag full of trauma,
right?
Right? And without the tools to process or cope with it. So I was just kind of reacting to it, even not understanding what was happening to me. But it's the podcast I wish I had before I started, because I just embarked on this quest without tools, without experience, without defenses or weapons. I had nothing.
Right.
And I hope that this will provide some of you who are listening and watching with some of the things that maybe you and I both didn't have.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're right. I think trauma, if we're speaking with I think most everyone experiences trauma, right? So, and it's my belief, it's not necessarily what happened to a person. Yes, that's very important, but it's how we come to understand ourselves and the world as a result of what happened, right?
Yes.
That's where you can learn about ways to make change,
Yes.
right? And heal, and our brains change throughout our lifespan, so that it's never too late.
Yes.
It's never too late to relate to our trauma in a different way and have a healing experience.
Yeah. And there's a word that I've started using more and more, and that's curiosity.
Yeah.
Because up to the point where I was using other words to describe my experience, I felt very much like I deserved an apology. I was kind of playing victim. I had felt very wronged or confused or angry, sad.
Mm-hmm.
All very valid emotions that went hand in hand with that experience. But at the same time, it wasn't until I could sort of step outside myself and look in, and maybe, like you're talking about your mother, you started to have that empathy for her. Like, well, that was how she was raised. She was, in fact, doing the best that she could with what she had.
Yes.
It still was terrible, maybe.
Right. Yeah, she lacked the curiosity, though, right? She lacked the curiosity to, when her daughter, me, was essentially begging her to really hear what I was saying, and I wanted her to go to therapy with her. I wanted to. We had all of these other, I have all these other connections to adoption. Her stepdaughter adopted a child.
Okay.
Several of our really good family friends had adopted kids, and she could talk about their adoption. She could not talk about mine or my brother's, but
Right.
I think I was a little closer in proximity, and perhaps because it was a mother-daughter relationship, she did have strong feelings about my brother when his birth mother found him. And even then I caught myself, right? Because that is, that really was taboo too. If we did not refer, in the very few times we talked about our birth mothers, first mothers, if we didn't have that adjective before, that could really send.
If you just
if it slipped out, mom,
yeah,
right?
Oof,
yeah,
that cut deep.
yeah.
Then.
And we were very, very close, but we could not be close, and we could not be as close as we might have been in a healthy way because she could not talk about this.
So I mean, that's sort of the built-in advice I think that we're imparting here to parents is like, and you tell me, how you feel about it, but it's like age appropriate is a thing. But if your child is 18, 19, 26, I mean, we can talk about adult themes and hard things.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Truth and transparency, right? And when I talk to adoptive parents who haven't, told their kids in their 7, 8, 9, 10, I have to take a few deep breaths and, talk about it's time now, right? Because we want parents to be their child's best advocate, and we want the information to funnel through them, right? And what does an adopted child need most? To be able to trust the people in their life, right?
Yes.
Because that is a theme that I see so often in my practice is this fear of trusting, right? Our original, the most important relationship that we were to have was broken, at some point at birth or a few months or even a few years, but that breach of trust, right? That between baby and mom. Yeah. So when my first message is, yes, you have to tell your child. You can't protect them you can't protect them from their truth, right? So often parents are like, oh, I don't want them to know, and I just don't want them to feel pain. They're going to feel pain. They're going to feel whatever they feel. And again, it's not what happened to them, but how they come to understand. And if parents can be with their kids through the journey of understanding and navigating this to the extent that the child wants and needs them to, it can be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you sort of hit it I'm on the other side of that, feeling the betrayal.
Yeah.
Now that I'm an adult, now that I understand the decisions that my adopted mom made, in the spirit of putting me first, I realized, oh, no, you put yourself first.
Right.
And I can only see that now from the perspective as an adult and a parent, by the way.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I know what decision you made, and you really did me wrong.
Yeah.
And that's what creates the continued barriers
Right.
to good relationships.
Right. Right. So there's age appropriate language, age appropriate what you're going to share with your child about their story. And by the time that they are a teen, if their chronological age is, congruent with their emotional age, by the time a person's a teenager, they get to know their story, right? So the teenage years are a time for everyone, adopted or not, that, kids are struggling with identity formation. Who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? And it's impossible to go through that phase without your information.
Yeah.
Right. So, but yes, age appropriate, and the truth. And parents can, again, I can't emphasize that more. Parents cannot protect their child from their child's truth, from their child's story.
Yeah. Can I put you on the spot, and can we do like a little role play?
Okay.
So my friend in real life has adopted a few children, and one of the things that we have been discussing is how to talk to that child about adoption. And as it happens, they've been reluctant to tell him all the story because his biological dad, in this case, is not a good person. So maybe we'll do a little role play, a little practice. We can just sort of vet it out here. But how do you go about telling that child? He's now 16, so he's at an age where he's old enough to understand things. His dad is a criminal, let's say, and he's like, I really want to meet my dad.
Yeah.
So how do you broach that subject? What's the language you use? How do you ramp into that?
Yeah. So again, you use the word curiosity, and that's a really powerful tool, right? So I think when parents can get more information, okay, that makes sense. You would want to meet your biological dad. What would you like him to know? What would you like him to know about you? So you start opening a conversation, and it's unfortunate that, in my opinion, that they haven't maybe shared just a little general information with him as a younger person, so that this conversation maybe doesn't have to be so feel so big to the parents, right?
Yeah.
So we talk to little kids about good decisions, bad decisions, and we don't, even if someone is, you said he's a bad guy.
Well, I don't want to make that judgment. Let's just say he's made bad decisions. And as a result, he's in prison.
Right.
Yeah, for those decisions. Yeah.
Right. So again, a 16-year-old, depending, there's all kinds of external factors, but is there a reason that he can't know that why his dad is in prison, that his dad is in prison?
Right.
Or is there, because kids, again, back to the fantasy piece, when teenagers don't have the information, they start making so much stuff up.
Yeah.
And if we go back to the notion of identity formation, oftentimes if they're thinking, oh, my dad's a bad guy, that explains why I'm always getting in trouble at school.
Oh,
and they
right.
start over-identifying. Again, this isn't a hard, fast rule, but there's a possibility that they over-identify then with, oh, yeah. That I'm like my dad.
That makes sense. Why? Yeah, my dad sailed the 7 seas. He was a pirate. He pillaged everything, and no wonder I have those tendencies too. Is the opposite also true? Like, my mom or dad, very successful, talented, beautiful, etc. Whatever adjective. Does that also happen?
Yeah. I mean, I think just that trying to, again, figure out how the adoptee's trying to figure out how they fit in, right?
Yeah.
So if they don't have all the information, they may very well be making things up, and sometimes. Generally, our brain, because we have a negativity bias, doesn't mean we're negative, but just it's why you might have a really okay day or a really good day, and then one bad thing happens, and that that's what it sticks in your brain,
Yeah.
right? So because of that negativity bias, generally people aren't making up really great stories, right?
Right. Yes. Good point.
Although I had read in my identifying information that my biological father liked music, so I was pretty sure that he was, in a band and pretty famous. And he wasn't.
Okay. Avid concert goer, maybe, or my dad followed the Grateful Dead everywhere, and
Oh, really?
yeah, like he was a huge fan
Oh,
of
wow.
Grateful. Yeah, and he was up in San Francisco area, and apparently like would see Janis Joplin, in the park, and then
Oh,
all
wow.
those. He was a hippie, in
Yeah.
the '60s. So
Yeah, I think my biological dad would have been in that group as well, but or maybe he was. I don't know a lot about him. I haven't. He's not alive anymore. He died when he was in his 40s, so before I had even started searching.
okay. How did it make you feel when your mom hired someone to find you? How did you feel?
Unusually calm.
Okay.
I remember exactly where I was when the phone rang, and it was, this is embarrassing, but I think we had a hard line, my roommate and I, and we'd been getting for the past few weeks beforehand a bunch of hang up calls, which it turns out it was her.
Oh, okay.
So when I did pick up the phone, it was like early evening, and she introduced herself. I had a very calm reaction, and then the part about the detective, I kind of liked.
Yeah.
I liked that.
Yeah.
It made me feel, I don't know, it made me feel like, wow, they really did want to find me.
She literally
Yeah.
invested,
Yeah.
resources to go and search you out. It wasn't just
Yeah.
like happenstance. Yeah.
Yeah. It didn't feel like an invasion of my privacy. It just felt like, oh, okay, now, this is what needed to happen next. And
Been reclaimed.
I've been reclaimed, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I only say that from the perspective of maybe wishing that could have been my experience, because I
Yeah.
had the opposite experience. And, I'm trying to remain curious.
Right.
But, I wonder how many other people are either in your shoes or in my shoes. And I was just curious about how that felt.
Yeah, it felt good to me, and I also I have several clients who have not had positive reunion experiences where they've searched and in just the most heartfelt ways, written letters and reached out, and when I say heartfelt and non-threatening ways, and just to crickets.
Mm-hmm.
Absolute no response. Not even a confirmation of I'm not ready to be in contact right now. Or
Right.
Just nothing.
Right.
Right. That secondary rejection is so painful to witness.
Yes. Yes. I think I'm wrestling with it, even though I've now manufactured several possible reasons, right? That I think there's some validity to, like, just based on the anecdotal evidence I have. So I don't know how my brain is dealing with that, but I want to go there in a second. Let's go back to the fog.
Okay.
What is the fog?
Yeah. So I know a lot of people, adoptees, don't like that term. They think it's negative or derogatory. I'm okay with it. I think the fog is, to me, the definition, and I think adoptive parents can be in the fog, first parents can be in the fog, adoptees can be in the fog. It's just that time or that space where adoption is great, and it's adoptees are lucky and they should be grateful, and there's no such thing as separation, loss, or trauma, and that adopting a child is the same as birthing a child. Yeah, where there's just everything is unicorns and rainbows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're literally seeing it through like a rose-colored lens.
Right.
You don't
Right.
have clarity.
Right.
Maybe you see it for what it's not.
Yeah, that it's just there's no hardship. There's no loss. There's no need to connect the dots. It's funny because a lot of my clients will say, I want to go back in the fog, right? And you can't. Once you set foot out,
It's true.
You can't go back.
Yeah.
But you can acquire skills and tools and rewire your brain.
Maybe something to think about. Are you in the fog? Are you out of the fog? I mean, maybe one of the indicators that you're coming out of the fog is at least to be able to identify that there is fog.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I might be in fog.
Yeah.
Let me feel this out.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, a fair question is, how has adoption and separation loss shaped you, right? Oh, it's not nothing I think about. It's, no, I don't want to meet. I have no curiosity about my biology or my biological.
I'm just fine.
I'm just fine.
I'm so happy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to be that guy. I
Yeah.
used to think that way.
Yeah.
Until I wasn't. But
And it's okay. I mean, coming out of the fog isn't the path for everyone.
yeah.
There's probably something holistic about it, though, and the integrating the past into the present that allows for a person to have a wide experience and a wide range of emotions that I think is authentic.
Maybe use me as the guinea pig a little bit here, and I can tell you about some of the things that I'm experiencing. You maybe can help with some taxonomy or labeling, or make some distinctions about it. One of the things I've been thinking about lately is, as a result of my experience, I tend to be what's called, with quotes, easygoing, right?
Adaptive.
I'm adaptive. I'm just like,
Yeah.
as Bruce Lee would say, like, there's a vase. You have to be the water in the vase. Doesn't matter what vase you're poured into, be the water.
Yeah.
Now, there's something to that. That's good advice, right? To like roll with it or be adaptive, but I tend to find myself being like that all the time.
Right.
Even when I should be unhappy about what's just been presented to me.
Yeah. What a conditioned response, though, right, to your environment, perhaps.
Yeah.
Growing up. I mean, I also tend to be adaptive, which I think is a positive trait most of the time. But when it's just putting aside my own needs, I've had to really learn, am I being adaptive, or am I just putting aside my own needs to make sure the other is okay?
Yeah. Now, is that adaptive? Is that same thing as like being a pleaser?
Yeah.
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 This is something I've been thinking a lot about lately, because I just caught myself, like when, I don't know, like I'm getting the short stick, right? Instead of the long stick, or it's like, this doesn't really seem like a good deal for me. And yet I'm just willing to go with it. Why is that? I'm very curious.
Yeah. So I guess I'm going to go back. So is adaptive the same thing as being a pleaser? No. I think adaptive is coping with things and maybe having an easygoing stance. The part when it gets a little dicey, when it becomes like people pleasing, I think that's not being adaptive. That's being a people pleaser, right? But so adaptive can be being flexible and adaptive. I think is just a good trait for good mental health in general.
Right.
But to go to the opposite side of being so adaptive that you're not taking care of yourself and meeting your own needs, that's where again it's I think more of a conditioned response, perhaps being in one's adoptive family, thinking, oh, I need to go along with everything so that I can keep my place in this family, and I don't have to lose another, mom or dad.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like that you had that experience at 19, and it, 5 years went under the bridge before you could readdress it.
Yeah, I think I was definitely there's two kind of adaptations I think adoptees can have, and they're not necessarily fixed. But the adaptive adoptee, the one that just kind of goes along with everything, or the conditioned response of testing and testing and testing, right? So one is trying to do everything right and be perfect, people please, so that they can stay in their family. That was definitely my style. Whereas my brother was like testing, 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 and again, unconscious. They're not conscious adaptations, but and they're coping skills. They're not personality traits. But my brother was like pushing the limits. Perhaps thinking I'm going to show these parents that I'm not worth, keeping. Right. So testing all the limits.
Yeah. Or could it be something like, let's see how deep the love really is.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Almost like and I am guilty of that sometimes. I'll do that self-sabotage thing where it's like, I already think that it's, either it probably is a deep feeling of not feeling worthy or good enough. I'm sure that's the root. Although I don't feel like that in the moment. But I have caught myself either self-sabotaging, thinking, before you can reject me, Leslie, I'm going to reject you.
Right.
And, I'm going to show you.
Right. Yeah. Those are such common, again, they're not personality traits. They're coping mechanisms, right? They're ways that we cope and beliefs that we have, again, around what happened to us early in our life, right? So some of the beliefs are, I'm not lovable, people leave, it's not safe to trust, I'm too much, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
Right?
What do you think it was that your mom was experiencing when she didn't talk to you for a week? That sort of detaching or that silent treatment. What is that about?
That was just, I think, her way. It was a very uncommon thing that she would do. But it was the one thing that she could do that would really unravel me.
Send a message.
Right.
You've done it this time.
Right. So that
this is severe.
I'm sure that week is it's kind of funny because I think that week after that, when she found out that I was trying to get my identifying information, and she found out in a very roundabout way, which makes it all even worse. But she and my dad had just separated, and because records in California are still very sealed, at the time, in order for me to get that identifying information, I needed a waiver signed by myself, by one of my adoptive parents, and by my biological mother. They all had to be in this file.
Yeah, the stars aligned.
Right.
Yep.
So, and
Unanimous.
even though I was in my 20s, it had to be one of my adoptive parents or proof that they were both dead. So I knew I wasn't going to ask my mom to sign this waiver. So I didn't and don't have a close relationship with my father, but I thought, I'll ask him. I'm sure he'll do it. He said, no, I'm not going to sign it behind your mom's back, but she's okay. We've talked about this day for a long time, and she'll be fine. Just ask her to sign it. And I made him promise me that he wouldn't let her know that I was doing this. Again, that instinct that I had that this is really not going to go well. And he hung up the phone from me and called her and told her that I was doing this. So it was like kind of a double slap.
Yeah.
So that period of time after this little incident where my mom knew that I was doing this terrible, terrible, terrible thing.
How dare you?
I know. Is very blurry to me. But I imagine it was something like she wasn't taking my calls. Usually I talked to her several times a week. I probably, again, my younger parts, right? We all carry our younger parts. And I'm positive that my child self, felt annihilated, right? That I'm going to die unless I get her to respond to me and make sure that she knows I love her so much and I only have one mom and all that, it's just, it's embarrassing to talk about now, but I think it's important too because I recognize that was the conditioning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just in your defense, haven't we all done that to some degree?
Sure. Sure.
Are we all not doing it still now?
I'm not doing it still now. I'm working really hard to not do that, right? That's something that in relationships I've really had to be aware of, right? That I have, we can be independent and interdependent, and that's a healthier way to be in relationship.
Yeah. That is actually a really good point. This false choice. I love this idea. Or maybe I don't want to do a double negative, but it's like, or a double positive. I'm not sure what the linguistics here on this, but in any case, sometimes we fall into this false choice or a false dichotomy, like it's either this or it's that. And it's like, actually, I can be really pissed and sad at what you did, but also still love you.
Yeah,
That's
Absolutely.
possible.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah. So I didn't really answer your question. I don't know what her experience was other than I'm guessing ultimate rejection,
Yeah.
right? How could you? You open this Pandora's box. To
Yeah.
this day, I hear that word Pandora's box and I'm like, in her fantasy, right? Her fantasy of who my birth mother was.
Right. You've
right?
unleashed hell, Leslie.
Right.
Come
yeah.
on.
I mean, a very nice person, actually, right? Who's also, has also grieved this loss.
Your brother. What's your relationship like now with your brother?
We have we're not close, but we have a nice relationship.
Yeah.
He lives in the Midwest, and it's very funny because he never expressed a curiosity about his biological parents, or didn't ever wonder if he had siblings. And his birth mother found him. She actually was my adoptive mom's worst fantasy. She showed up at my adoptive mom's house.
Oh, wow.
Looking for my brother.
Just knocked on the door.
Yep, just knocked on the door and said, "Hi, are you?" My brother's name is Brett. Are you Brett's adoptive mom? And of course, my mom didn't like that either, right? So,
yeah.
But my brother.
What happened? Did she?
Well, my mom
called the door. No soliciting.
Too much sharing, but
how old was he at the time?
He was
ish.
He was probably 20.
Okay.
But he wasn't living at home. She just
we're not talking like a 12-year-old in sixth grade. We're talking like a 20-year-old man.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she told him, and my brother and his birth mother were in reunion for a very long time.
Okay.
They visited each other. She flew out to him, and Christmas gifts, birthday gifts, back and forth. When my brother asked about his biological father, which he did reach out to me and we talked about it, and I said, of course, ask her.
Yeah.
She said she doesn't remember. I said, okay. Well, let's, ask her again. Just
maybe not.
Maybe not, right? I did explain that. Maybe not. But it's possible. And then he asked her again, and then she's not. They were in reunion for more than 15 years.
Okay.
And then he asked about this, asked this terrible question of who's my biological father, and she stopped speaking to him.
Are you saying if you want to ask the question, you just go in and ask it? Is there a way?
Again, the truth. I think you can be graceful and you can be curious and you can ask the question.
Yeah.
Right? I'm trying to. Yeah, I'm trying to think if that is. Yeah, I just think you can ask the question.
Yeah. Well, I just get this image of shame being such a powerful emotion enough to just like break up relationships. I would rather not ever talk to you again than feel any bit of shame that I feel.
Right.
Like, that's so odd.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And tragic.
Yeah.
That you just toss away.
Right. In the same way that I was saying, like, adoptive parents can't protect their child from their child's truth, adoptees can't protect their biological parents from their truth, from the biological parents' truth, right? So my brother asking his birth mom, who's my biological father?
Yeah.
There's truth there, right?
Right.
And it's not his job. I don't believe it's the adoptee's job to protect any of their parents.
Right.
From the truth.
Absolutely. Well, so let's just talk to parents who give up their kids for a second and just say, okay, literally, let's go to the worst case scenario. Let's just make something up that we can think of. The worst thing I can think of is if you were a victim of a violent crime, sexual assault, and that was your child. To me, I can't think of, or possibly if it was a family member and there was, some sort of incest, sexual assault, that's probably on my scale as bad as it can get. Okay, so if that's it, there's no shame to be felt there because you're the victim here, right? And yet you're holding on to this, what you maybe deem as shameful, right? And then all the shades of between black and white and gray in between of what the possibilities are.
Right.
What do you say to these parents who are holding on to this guilt or shame and not want to let the skeleton out. Because my story is very much the same way, although fortunately it's not a sexual assault story, but my mom, through her sister and her children, told me very directly, oh, everyone knows that she had a child with Bruce, my dad, but no one talks about it because it would just ruin everything, the all-encompassing everything. Well, what does that even mean, right?
Right.
And, this was a family secret. The skeleton needs to stay in the closet. And I'm thinking, why? Like, what's at stake here, right? So maybe impart some advice. What do you say to those parents who are still holding on, they're like keeping the door closed to the skeletons? What's the big deal?
Well, I think there's, I think there's like a societal
Right.
piece to it, right?
Right.
I don't know that it still exists today. It was much worse when I was born, probably when you were born.
Well, that's what I would say. Without empathy. It's like, hey, that was then, this is now.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I get it. 60s, sex before marriage, maybe you're religious. That's a sin, gets you kicked out of the church, kicked out of your house. I get it. But like, now we're in 2022, folks.
Right.
And you're, 70 years old.
Right.
There's a lot of things have passed.
Right.
So can we not now talk about adult themes?
Well, I think if we're talking still about that era of, I think you're speaking to, you're asking me about biological parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you say to them?
Yeah.
They still feel like they're holding on to it.
Yeah.
How do they let go?
Well, I just think the conditioning, right? So you said women who gave up their children, and if you talk to many of these women, they didn't give up their child, right?
Fair point.
They were really, many of them were coerced. Many of them had in my birth mom's case, there just was no other option given.
Yeah.
Right. So that shame, and then so they are really told, your baby's going to have a better life. You're going to be able to go back to college, and you're going to get on with everything.
Yeah.
And you're not even going to remember this, right?
Right.
So part of their brain has to be so skillful that they go along with this narrative, right? And so then today, I don't know. I don't think I have a great answer for those to talk about those birth parents that do not want to be found, that do not want to have a relationship, because those certainly aren't the ones that I'm working with, right? I'm working with people who are in complicated reunions, that really want to work in 2022, no matter how old they are, at healing through some of this.
Yeah. I'm glad that you talked about sort of on the down low adoption language. That's important. And it was good for you to say that to me, because I do want to be sensitive if I'm saying the word give up. At the same time, as an adoptee, I don't believe, I personally do not want to or feel the need to tread lightly around adoption language.
Right.
In the same breath, I'll say everyone deserves respect, honor, and care. And you're right. I actually believe, and it's not proven, but I do believe that my mom probably had no choice. She was coerced, manipulated. The church, because she belonged to a high demand religion,
right?
Probably said, "This is a sin, but like, hey, honey, we'll take care of you. Reset your life. We got this. Now you can clean slate this thing." So I'm sure that she was a victim of all of that. At the same time, she did have to sign her name, so there is some accountability there.
Right. Of course.
But like, I guess in my case, now having been able to talk to my dad about this, and I don't know if I told you, I lost my dad in 2019. And
sorry.
Thank you. It was. I want to talk about some of these emotions around this, but the one thing that was so interesting to me when we were in reunion was he would apologize to me every single day.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, this is great. But I also said, because we got to a point where I was calling him Dad, and I would say, Dad, apologies are no longer necessary. Thank you for that. And actually, yes, you should apologize because I had to work my ass off to find you and you did nothing. You just sort of like, well, maybe this will happen, maybe not, like very passive. So I wish that he had hired a private investigator and was searching for me. That was my fantasy.
Yeah.
And so I said, thank you for apologizing. I accept. But now let's move forward and develop this relationship. No more need for these apologies, right? And I feel like that let him off the hook a great deal. It was almost like, it was a little bit like tearing the Band-Aid off. It was a little painful at first. And we just sort of dove into, getting to know each other. But once I sort of let him off the hook to say, I'm not mad at you. I've just always wanted to know who you are. And then as a result, like who I am.
Yeah.
Like, nature and nurture's a thing. How much, like, turns out you like hot mustard, so do I. We both love baseballs. All these different things was very interesting and fun for me. And that let him off the hook a lot. And then you could just see and feel, because he talked about his level of regret, like, oh, I see that you're actually really great. And now I realize I missed your whole life. And now I'm feeling even more sad about that.
Right.
And more apologies came.
Right.
But I said, that's natural, because I feel the same way. It's like, I didn't know who you were. And now talking to my sisters, they're half sisters, but I call them sisters. You're a terrific guy. And because I didn't have that dad, at my baseball practices or all that, it's like, now I'm dealing with the grief of missing all that.
Right.
And that's hard for me. And so it's complicated.
Yeah. So you have half sisters.
So I have sisters, yeah. Yeah, and they're amazing. In fact, this last weekend was her engagement party, so I flew up there and hung out with them. It was fun.
Nice.
And the younger of the two sisters, she got married a couple of years ago, and she asked me to officiate her wedding, which I did.
Wow.
And that was a huge honor.
Wow.
So we've become very fast friends and siblings, and that's meant everything to me. And because my dad is not here, I'm okay with saying it, because if I said it out loud, he might get his feelings hurt. But like, it's almost, and it was very unexpected that I almost feel closer to the siblings right away, immediately, more so than I did with him.
I think that's common.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like one degree removed.
Yeah.
And maybe not as, I hear that a lot. I actually wanted so badly to discover that one of either my biological father or my biological mother had other children, but neither of them did. I had a fantasy of having more siblings.
Yeah.
And yeah. So, but I do hear that. I do hear that there's connections formed with siblings and half siblings that are sometimes, the visits are more frequent,
Yeah.
or the phone calls are more frequent.
Yeah.
And maybe there's just a little less pressure.
Yeah. Or baggage, right?
A little less baggage, a little less pressure, or maybe maybe there's something just to like maybe there's like more commonality in age.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a generation thing
Yeah.
too. My dad, great person, terrible communicator, absolutely wretched, just like, very vague, would just have to really, I don't know, just peel back the layers so slowly. And my sisters just sort of say it as it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it could be generational. But
Yeah.
what I was going to say is we had all this time together for a couple of years. We had missed all of our life, together.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had a few short years, and then he died tragically. He went in for back surgery. He had a lot of pain throughout his life in a work-related accident that hurt his back. And he went in for corrective surgery, knowing that there were risks. He was 69 years old, kind of in poor health, but it's like a little bit of a Hail Mary pass. Like, if I can fix my back, I don't have to live with chronic pain, and I can actually have a quality of life. If it doesn't work out, it's a big risk, but at the same time, this is not really a life,
Yeah.
of high quality living. And because we had that discussion, I said, what are you going to do? He's like, I think I'm going to roll the dice, because he was just so miserable, you know. And so, sure enough, the surgery was a success, but very bad luck. He just got an infection, very common infection that you might get from, handling a doorknob or something. It's like his immunity was low. And I flew up to San Francisco to see him after surgery. He gave me the thumbs up, and I thought, okay, great, we did it. I flew back to LA, and within hours, my sisters called me and said, he's gone. This happened just like, phew. And so,
Wow.
yeah, it was a shock, but I felt very numb. And this is kind of what I want to ask you about, like how to deal with this is, I almost felt like having an out-of-body experience. Like I was
Like dissociating.
totally, like I felt numb. I don't know if I was in shock or if I was just like the defense mechanisms were coming up. Like I didn't have feelings. I couldn't cry. We had his funeral, and I was feeling a lot of complex feelings, but no tears were coming. And in my mind, I was just thinking, well, you just got punched in the mouth again, and so you'll get back up, you'll spit the blood out, and you'll get back up, and you'll just keep on walking. And so I was like, no, I don't want to be Mr. Tough Guy about this, but my body was doing it for me. I was like on autopilot. And again, it was kind of like looking at a shell of a body with me outside of it going, wake up, like show some emotion. Like this is not right. This is not normal. What's happening? This is a common theme with me. Unfortunately, it happens when I have those triggering moments.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's like a dissociative state, right? But that you were aware of. And again, if we talk about trauma, our bodies remember everything. So have you grieved since?
Yes, I have grieved. My dog died, and I wept like a baby when I had to take my dog to the vet and put her down. She was 14. She got cancer, and she lived a good life, but it was time. I lost it. Absolutely lost it. And I just even thinking about it right now, I get a lump in my throat. So yeah, I have.
Yeah. So, I think grief is a complicated journey, and that you may continue to grieve, right, in different ways, but that also, our younger parts remember that original grief, and so I think having some self-compassion and maybe not judging yourself, like I didn't grieve properly, and what's wrong with me, and just know that your grief may come out in these other very tender ways.
Yeah. You're calling it disassociation, like where you separate, or?
Well, I think and we all dissociate, right? I might drive the same route to work every day and not remember exactly which streets
you tune out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what you're describing is more of like you were aware that was happening, right? So you're kind of like above yourself, watching yourself, right? Those are common coping strategies.
Yeah.
When dealing with big issues.
Yeah. What I guess I'm not sure about is whether or not that's a healthy response or a healthy way of addressing it, because sometimes, it's a battle with my brain, right? Like I have this talk with my 14-year-old son all the time about things. I was like, sometimes your brain lies to you. It's not telling you the truth. Like right now, we're in your room. It's pitch black. It's bedtime. You're scared of the dark, I'm scared of the dark sometimes too, son. No worries. But like your brain's playing tricks. This is not a good time or appropriate to be scared, because there's actually nothing in here that's dangerous. I said, if we're camping out in the Amazon jungle in a loose tent with no weapons, we should be terrified because there's jaguars and snakes. But like your bedroom, you're on the second floor, very safe neighborhood, everything's secure, and now your brain's still telling you there's something to be scared of. We need to quiet the brain. So I don't know if when I have these triggering moments or I feel like I've had something go wrong, and I start to dissociate, or I shut down, or I go inside. If I'm doing that right, am I doing it right?
Well, I think those are opportunities to ground
Yeah.
and be aware of the present, right? So what's happening right now, looking around and, naming a few things in the room, right? Because your brain thinks it's trying to protect yourself, but it
Right.
doesn't need to protect you,
Yeah.
right? You're safe in that moment. So being able to look around and name a few things that you can see, that you can smell, that you can hear, and bringing your attention back to the present. And sometimes just that will allow you to be in the experience a little bit more.
Yeah. Let me give you another example. What happened last night at the party. So I went up with my uncle, my dad's brother, and we're now becoming very close. He's 7 years older than his brother, but my dad and him were best friends, like just inseparable best buddies. And so when he died, my uncle was heartbroken and still is. And last night I could tell kind of what I thought. I could see his mind working. He was looking at my sister and thinking of my dad, who couldn't be there, and probably thinking, why isn't he here? He's missing all this. And he just broke down and started crying. And so, my sisters and I were kind of around about him and just sort of sat with him. And some people tried to cheer him up, and I was thinking, no, let's just sit with him and just be in the moment. But he was telling me, sorry, Uncle, if you're listening to this podcast, but he was telling me that he can't look at any pictures of my dad still. And it's 2019, and now we're 2022. It's just too painful for him. And I didn't really know what to say other than, I'm so sorry. I didn't have words.
Yeah. And maybe that's the perfect thing to say, right? Again, I think a lot of times people aren't comfortable sitting with people who are grieving or grieving themselves and just letting themselves have whatever feelings they have, right? So reminding ourselves that all feelings have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? They might be consecutive feelings, but that when we can let ourselves have the feeling and just know it's gonna let it, the grip is gonna loosen a little bit.
Yeah.
And again, reminding ourselves we're safe in the moment. I think that's there's beauty in that.
Yeah.
It's when we try to tell someone, to cheer someone up, or it's not that bad, or
Yeah.
You won't feel this way forever. That kind of, I think, blocks the grieving process.
Right. You're not giving it a chance to air it out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is good advice. And thinking about my dog, I had a good cry, like one I haven't had in maybe ever. I felt like an idiot. And that's probably just the male idiot in me trying to rear up his head, saying, be tough, soldier on, that kind of thing. But I did let myself go. I was actually uncontrollable. If I'm being honest, it was terrible.
Yeah.
I felt so much sadness to that. It was like a child,
Yeah.
Yeah, loved that dog.
And
Still love that dog.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And who knows what else was within those, who knows what other memories and feelings were in those tears.
Oh, yes. Good point. Yeah, that's an excellent point. But it reminded me of something. So as I was in the airport, on my way out to fly with Uncle up to San Francisco for the sister's wedding, Rachel, we were talking. Well, what's nice is they asked me all about adoption. There's no shyness or trepidation. They're just like, hey, tell me about it. And so I get a chance to express myself. And as I was doing, I said, by the way, I have this podcast I started this last year. Have you guys listened to it? And they said, no, I haven't listened to it. Oh, why not? And I'm sure that they're maybe afraid that maybe I'd say something bad about them, which I haven't, which I wouldn't. I mean, there's really nothing bad to say per se. But there's a woman who was eavesdropping on our conversation, and she's like, oh, what is that podcast? My friend is adopting a child, or in the process of. I'd like to know what that is. And I thought, Okay, I'm going to share it with you. But buckle up.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's exactly what you want to hear. But so let's impart a little bit of advice, or maybe at least talk about it a little bit. People who are in consideration of adoption, because I could have talked to that woman, I think, for hours and said my piece, but I'd love to hear it from your perspective. What do you say to people who are like, oh yes, I want to adopt a child, or I want to foster a child. What should I know that I don't know?
There's so much.
Where do you start?
Yeah, where do you start? Yeah, I always encourage people that are thinking about it to talk to adoptees, listen to adoption-related podcasts that are the voice of adoptees sharing their experience. Yeah, doing their own homework. Why do they, again, that curiosity, why do you want to adopt?
Right.
Right? Do you recognize that adoption? Have you grieved if the reason you're choosing adoption is because you were unable to have a biological child? Have you grieved your inability to conceive?
Right.
Because adopting a child isn't the same as having a biological child.
Right.
Right? Adopting a child is also not a replacement for a child who's died.
Right.
Right? So parents doing their own work and committing that they're going to continue to do their own work as it relates to adoption and to their adopted child's experience throughout their child's life.
Yeah. So it's maybe a loaded question, but like, how do you grieve? Are you talking like, when you're saying doing the work, I'm assuming like talking to a therapist, mental health professional? I mean,
Yeah, that could be part of it, but just really, really recognizing that adoption is not, the answer to
the void you
infertility.
feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a way of making a family. It's one way of many ways to make a family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Say more about that.
Well, I mean, having a biological child is a way to make a family. Having, bringing in, kinship adoption, raising a relative's child is another way to make a family. Fostering kids is a way to make a family. Assisted reproduction is a way to make a family. But they're all different ways to make a family. And I think it's important to recognize that.
Yeah. What are you? We talked a little bit about these children, now adults, who are finding out that they were conceived, maybe through science, or a donor child or something like that. What are some of the commonalities you're finding between adoptees and those children?
Yeah. So I think the biggest crossover is between LDAs, or late discovery adoptees, right, who find out much later in life, usually by accident,
Right.
that they were adopted. And
One of these 23andMe or
23andMe, or they,
Ancestry.
they're having a medical procedure, and they're recognizing, that their parents in the room, and the doctor says something, asks a question about biology, and there's this awkward silence, and or a cousin lets a person know,
Yeah.
tells a person that, oh, I know you were adopted. And also, yes, the genetic testing. But I think the commonality is, one, shock,
Right.
a huge, tremendous sense of betrayal,
Right.
a sense of what else hasn't been shared with me.
Yeah.
What are the other secrets that you haven't told me? Those can be questions that adult children or adolescent children can ask their parents. But a lot of times people are finding this, late discovery adoptees are finding out after their parents are dead, right? They're sorting through papers,
Mm-hmm.
and they find paperwork. Another commonality is often people kind of having a sense of, oh, now it makes sense.
Now I get it,
right?
yeah.
Now I get it. I get why I never felt a sense of fully belonging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so how are you starting to help them? Like, what are some of the tactics that you employ?
Well, I think, bearing witness to their story, talking about a grieving process, helping them navigate through that grieving process, and then connecting with community, right? Other
Right.
people. So I think a lot of times people feel so alone.
Yeah.
So helping them connect with other people that have had a shared experience, that can be really helpful.
Yeah. That's been big for me too, is connect with, I mean, I sort of expected it, but it's been great,
Yeah.
right? To share stories. And you're right, they're so different.
Yeah.
Some people like had a great experience, other people did not.
Yeah.
And then it's a mixed bag. Yeah. But
There's so many both ands. I like to use that phrase. There's so many both ands in adoption. I think I first heard that from Lori Holden, who's an adoptive parent. Her book, The Open-Hearted Way to Open Adoption, she talks about all the both ands in adoption, right? You can, as an adoptee, you can have good experiences, and you can also still grieve not knowing your biology,
yeah,
right?
That's the false dichotomy that we can fall into. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we've only scratched the surface on your talents and abilities. Maybe we will close this episode with like saying, okay, this is episode 1 with Lesli.
Okay, that's fine.
Because there's so much more I want to ask you.
Yeah.
More tactical, I guess, advice. If there's anything maybe in closing that you want to say or you're thinking about, and maybe with one particular group in mind, whether that's the foster kid community or the late adoptee community or the parents, if you have something that we want to put a cap on this, what would you say?
Cap. That's a tough one. I don't know. I'm a big advocate for the truth. I'm a huge proponent in helping people learn practices that enhance neuroplasticity and that rewiring of our brain, right? I wouldn't be doing this job every day if I didn't believe that we can actually rewire some things into our brain that allow for healing. And that's a big piece of how I work with clients in my groups is teaching mindful awareness and self-compassion and working with reparenting our younger parts that didn't get what they need.
Yeah.
And the outcome from that is really positive. I don't know if that's really the cap that you were asking for.
Well, if I could just echo what you've said or what I've heard today, it's that, especially speaking from the male perspective, because that's the only one I know.
Yeah.
It is okay to be not okay.
Yes.
Right. And in fact, we're all not okay in varying degrees.
Yes.
And the healthiest thing that I have learned is that sort of leaning into whatever feels uncomfortable, scary, makes you want to throw up or cry. This is where the magic begins to happen. Not where it's solved, but it's like, this is where the work begins.
Yes.
It's the gateway through which you have to, or the gauntlet through which you have to walk or run.
Right.
But there is a light on the other side at some point.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so. Yeah.
As always, thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave a review and as many stars as you think this show deserves. It helps more people find us and join the community. I want to hear from you. What do you want to know about Adoptionland? How can I help? Are you a parent who's given up a child and you're wondering, how to find that child or whether or not you should reach out to contact them? Are you an adoptee like me and you want to know how to go about it? There's resources out there I can point you to. Are you thinking about adopting a child or bringing in a child from foster care? Leave me a note or a message. Reach out to me somehow. You can leave me a question via SpeakPipe. It's speakpipe.com/adoptionland. You can do it privately or anonymously. And I'll do my best to answer your question on one of the next episodes. But I appreciate you listening. I love you guys. This is therapeutic for me. I hope it's helpful and healing for you. And I'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks very much.